Welcome to Finance at the Jobsite, the podcast where construction finance meets the field. I'm your host, Rishi Srivastava, founder of Being Human. In each episode, I sit down with construction CFOs, controllers, owners, project managers, IT leaders, ERP consultants, and industry experts to uncover how they connect the back office with the field, choose and implement technology, manage cash flow, and drive profitable projects. Whether you are running the numbers, leading the team, or designing the systems that keep projects moving, this is your place to learn what's working, what's broken, and what's next in construction finance. Today, our guest is Aditya Pandit. Aditya, welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
The first section here is on your background, career, and leadership journey. You've navigated a career path from India to a master's program in Charlotte and now a project manager role with major responsibility. How has that immigrant journey shaped the way you approach leadership, communication, and earning trust with owners, lenders, and trade partners?
Moving from India to the US taught me that credibility isn't given, you have to earn it. Early on, I learned to listen more than I speak, over prepare and understand what matter to the owners and leadership. In construction, like trust is everything. Owners and lenders don't want optimism, they want predictability and be honest in your communication. Like if something's off, they need to know. That mindset also shapes how I work with subcontractors. Many have decades of experience, so I don't lead with ego. I lead with coordination, fairness, and accountability. When people see you organized and willing to own your problems with them, trust builds easily. That mindset of early trust daily and letting results speak has stayed with me throughout my career.
Some people they just talk and don't deliver anything.
Yeah, really.
And if you can deliver consistently and just talk when needed, that's like in itself is a great thing.
Yeah, that's a good quality to have.
As someone who has worked across senior living, large multifamily, tenant improvements, and infrastructure, what have you learned about building realistic schedules? And where do contractors consistently underestimate time and cost?
One of the biggest lessons I've learned is that schedules don't fail in the field. They fail in the assumptions made during planning. On paper, everything looks clean. In real life, construction lives in a gray area between trades, inspections, approvals, and decisions. Contractors usually underestimate three things. First is design coordination and revisions, especially on mixed use or tenant driven projects where small changes ripple across multiple trades. Second is like long lead items, especially HVAC equipment, glass or glazing, elevators, kitchen equipment. If those aren't ordered early, they quietly drive delays. Third is inspections and approvals. They're outside your control, but often assumed to be quick. One mistake, trade on like for example, kitchenwood equipment, and if it fails, then the entire process has to be repeated, and that takes like not days but weeks of delays. Realistic scheduling means planning backwards from inspections, building in buffers and sequencing trades honestly. A good schedule looks conservative on paper, so it can be aggressive in execution.
I love it. Conservative on paper, aggressive on execution.
Yes, that's the strategy which you have to follow.
For a younger project engineer or assistant PM who wants to grow into an quote unquote A to G project role like yours, what skills or experience should they prioritize early in their career?
The best advice I give young project managers is simple. Don't hide behind your desk, especially early in your career. Get into the field, learn how work is actually built, not just how it's drawn. Drawing don't show sequencing conflicts, they don't show access issues, they don't show real world constraints. You also need to own your budget, learn cost reports, forecasting, change orders, because money is the language of ownership, and get comfortable with all your trades, ask questions, be friends, learn where the scope overlaps and where conflicts usually happen. Finally, take real ownership. Like if something goes wrong, step in, even if it's not officially your project. A big turning point for me was when I stopped just doing my tasks and started treating the whole project as my responsibility. When you think like a owner, communicate like a leader, and execute like a builder. That's like A to Z of a project manager.
Yes. The job's so complex, man. There's office who's got these all these schedules and estimates, and then there's field realities. And you're kind of
Yeah.
connecting two different worlds here.
Yeah, people usually don't try to merge them together from the initial get going. They see that as two different departments at the start. But actually, when you think about merging those two departments from the get go, that's where your project will be successful.
The next section here is on owner, developer, GC model, how it really works. You work for an owner GC that buys land, develops it, builds it, and then manages it long term. From your seat as project manager, how does that full life cycle model change how you think about cost, quality, and risk compared to a traditional GC?
Working in a owner developer GC model, it changes how you think about everything because the accountability doesn't end at turnover. In a traditional GC role, success is finishing per the contract. But in a owner GC model, every decision follows you long after the ribbon cutting.
Mm-hmm.
Cost isn't just about initial price. It's about
Mm-hmm.
the total cost over the life of the project or the life of the building. I always look ways to save money upfront so that it becomes less expensive when the time comes to to maintain, operate, repairs over the course of the building lifespan. Quality expectations go way up as well because punch list quality isn't enough when you're going to own and operate the building. You care about how materials age, how systems perform, and how the building actually works once people move in. And risk isn't transferred, it's retained in a traditional GC owner model. Design gaps, entitlement delays, market shifts, interest rates all stay on the same balance sheet. That forces better pre construction, earlier decisions, and more comprehensive assumptions. At the end of the day, you build like you're going to be writing the checks forever.
Yeah, yeah, it's such a different world, right? A GC, a traditional GC who just s- gives the ownership to the developer, they don't have to worry about what happens to this building 3 years down the line.
They just sign the contract and go by the contract. But as a owner GC, you just have to make sure that the project is done right,
Mm.
no matter where you are.
Your portfolio includes commercial, multifamily, and now a renewed push into single family lots. How does the financial logic differ across those product types? And what makes a deal, quote unquote, pencil for each?
So each project type has a very different financial logic. And if you understand that upfront, a deal that looks good on paper can fall apart in construction. Multifamily is about volume and efficiency. Small misses add up fast. Like for example, $2,000 change order per unit multiplied that times by 200 units, for example, and it's like 400,000 all of a sudden. So that's a huge money. If the design doesn't work, it will not work for 200 times. Commercial construction, especially retail mixed use, is tenant driven. Tenant credit, lease terms, how fast the space starts making money matter just as much as construction cost. A tenant opening like 6 months late can wipe out returns, so schedules and coordinations are critical. Single family lots are different, margins are smaller, but capital turns faster. They're sensitive to land, infrastructure, absorption rate, but they give you flexibility to phase work and respond to the demand and how the contracts are signed. To be frank, nowadays the contracts are pretty slow and we are not getting a lot of contracts as we used to before. At the end of the day, a deal pencils when cost, schedule, financing, and timing aligns. And construction sits right in the middle of that, somewhere middle in that. It's a sweet
Mhm.
spot. If construction misses, the pro forma doesn't work no matter what. The building, it will always tell the truth.
Several multifamily projects are fully designed but on hold, waiting for financing. When capital markets tighten, how does that uncertainty show up in your day to day work?
When capital markets tighten, the impact shows up long before construction starts. From the outside, project may look stalled, but behind the scenes, there's often more work happening. We are constantly repricing deals because numbers that worked 6 months, a year ago don't work anymore.
Mhm.
Rates change, lenders adapt, assumptions, the budgets get rebuilt. Value engineering becomes a focus, but not cutting corners. But the question is what we can rethink without hurting the project long term. We also use phasing as a financial tool, dealing scopes or amenities to stay flexible while keeping the momentum. When capital is tight, we also review estimates much more closely. Broad assumptions aren't enough. We go like line by line, run constant what if scenarios around several different things like rates, rents, timings, procurements, and so on. Nowadays, AI estimating that's really a thing now and it really helps speed up the process. The reality is that design that made sense like at 4% interest rates, they don't work at 7% interest rates. From a project manager's perspective, the hardest part is staying ready to build without wasting money just to feel busy. It becomes a balancing act of patience, discipline, and alignment between development, finance, and construction. When those teams stay aligned, uncertainty is managed. When they don't, it's a real risk.
So many factors. You are involved in everything from land acquisition and rezoning to design, bidding, construction, and asset management support. Which stage is the most misunderstood by people outside development?
Pre construction phase, I think, is the most often misunderstood. From the outside, it may look like nothing is happening, but this is actually when most of the project risks are evaluated. During this stage, your work on things like permits, zoning, utilities, environmental checks, soil testing, geotechnical reports, early budgets, and figuring out all these and making sure how project is actually going to be built. It's also when you make sure the project makes sense for a marketing and financial standpoint. If things go wrong here, construction doesn't fix it, it will just expose it. A bad soil assumption, a missed utility constraint, or like misunderstood zoning conditions can like come back years later and blow up the deal. Construction looks like hardest part because it's visible, but it's really just executing the decisions when you're made during pre-construction. So when pre-construction is done right, construction is predictable. When it's rushed or underfunded, no time on the field or any heroics in the field will save the project.
Also, pre-construction, people are estimating and guessing sometimes some of these things. They don't have the complete knowledge of how things are going to play out.
The experience and I think AI nowadays is like helping us a lot. So that's something which everyone should be using and making use of the facility.
The next section here is on project finance, HUD, and market realities. Your company uses HUD financing, which you described as quote unquote a whole different animal. For people unfamiliar with HUD, can you walk through the major steps and what that 1 year approval process feels like from the inside?
So HUD financing is very different from a normal bank loan. HUD isn't just lending you money, they are your long-term partners at risk. You're not only proving you can build the project, you're also proving you can operate safely and efficiently for the next 30 to 40 years. The process moves in stages. First project it has to fit through HUD programs like HUD type, affordability, market demand, long-term stability. Then comes the third party reports, appraisals, market study, environmental study, cost reviews, energy modeling, the green building modeling. If those assumptions don't line up, everything pauses. So you have to go back to the drawing board, make sure all these processes and all these stages are met and they are done right. HUD also expects design and cost to be nearly locked in early. So that
Mm.
we'll figure it out later. We cannot have that. After months of HUD review and revisions, the hardest part is like patience, keeping everyone aligned without building anything. But once you close the project, the payoff is like long term benefits and it's fixed rates and there's like real financial stability for the project.
Change orders are not easy with HUD.
It's very difficult. You have to go through a long list of items, and all your contractors have to follow Davis Bacon wages, which is again high wages. You have to provide them all the documentations, and nowadays it's pretty difficult.
HUD's green building requirements And MIP incentives influence design decisions. Can you share an example where a spec or system seemed expensive upfront but made financial sense once hard incentives and long term operations were considered?
So all the systems are tied together and they should work seamlessly. One good example is upgrading to a high efficiency HVAC system along with a better building envelope. Basically, more efficient heating and cooling, plus better walls, windows, roofs to hold comfort. So on the surface, it looks unnecessary first cost, especially with construction inflation. But on a whole, that's where the HUD MIP reductions will help you to save on a long term. But when you like factor in like HUD MIP reductions, lower operating costs, fewer maintenance calls, and the math changes quickly. On a project, extra upfront cost paid for itself quickly because we save the money over the time on this MIP program. Things like energy bills and tenant comfort. These are few items that I can mention. As an owner operator, we look beyond spreadsheets. Better systems mean fewer complaints, lower turnover, and more predictable operations. HUD's green requirement push you to think long term and often protect you from short-sighted value engineering.
Your company is in the middle of a finance leadership transition from CFO to controller turns CFO. From your perspective, what do you wish construction CFOs understood better about the field? And what do you wish project managers understood better about finance?
That's a great question because the biggest risk in development usually lives between construction and finance. It's not within either group. While it's like bittersweet to see a long-term CFO retire, transition like that also highlights how important alignment is between these two teams. What I wish CFOs better understood is that construction risk isn't linear. Problems don't show up neatly at month end
Mhm.
things like weather or inspections, trade issues, design gaps, they can happen suddenly. Sometimes the least bad decision in the field looks expensive on paper, but actually it saves the project. I would love to see financial teams spend more time on the job sites, learning how the sequencing happens, how the inspections really work, and the what are the cost swings and why the change orders made real sense. On the flip side, I wish project managers understood the cost of capital, carry cost, interest cost, delayed stabilizations can like quickly kill the deal. Even if you finish under budget, schedule slip isn't just an operational issue. It's a financial one that compounds daily. The strongest teams are where project managers think like owners and finance understands how buildings are actually built.
I'm about to talk to a trial lawyer, and he's going to talk about some of the issues with the schedules. You know, when they don't line up, how the owner gets mad at with the GC, and it can end up in court and cause a lot of litigation.
Yeah, that's something everyone, especially the project managers, have to keep that in mind and make sure the project is run smoothly.
The next section here is construction, quality, and operations. You operate in a coastal, high humidity market and mentioned recurring issues like condensation, drainage failures, and mold. How do those maintenance realities feed back into how you design details, manage quality control, and budget contingencies?
So in coastal areas where there is high humidity in summertime, most maintenance problems aren't just bad luck. They come from the design or construction details that were not done right initially.
Mhm.
So once you accept that, it changes how you build. We get very frustrated on water management, like if the site is not properly graded, building pads don't set on the right elevations, air vapor barriers are not done right, the facades not done right, if the canopies are not draining outwards of the building. And these are the small little items that has have to make sure that the building design is done right and the building envelope is sealed watertight. Mechanical designs matter just as much. Systems have to control humidity, not just temperature. And the site design, like landscaping, drains, canopy downspouts, has to move water like again away from the building and not towards the building. A lot of condensation and mold issues get blamed on maintenance, but usually it's from the start and it's with the design team, how they have designed the building, and the construction team, how they have missed the coordination. And because of that gap, after like few years, it shows up, and that's where the blame would be on maintenance. I don't think it should be a maintenance blame. That's why our quality checks is very intentional. Pre-cover inspections, making sure all the photographs are taken, waterproofing mock-ups, trade-specific checklist for this climate control, all have to be seamlessly organized and made sure all these inspections are done right. In this market, like water always wins. It's a humid environment. But unless you plan and build for it, then if you do it right, then you'll be all good.
There's a building near where I live, and I was talking to an inspector who inspected that building. Immediately after the building finished, the superintendent took a workers' comp and he retired. He, because there's some big issue that's going to happen with that building in a year or two, and he just wanted to get away from it.
Uh, you will get you, they will come and get you even if you do that.
You said the quote unquote real project begins after construction when operations and maintenance take over. How do you collaborate with the asset management team so recurring failures and tenant feedback actually improve how you build the next project?
That feedback loop between construction and asset management is one of the biggest advantages of being an owner operator. We don't treat asset management as a separate department. We see them as our post construction quality auditors. Every recurring issue gets tracked, where it's happening, which system is involved, and whether it's a design issue, an installation issue, or it's a maintenance issue. We get all these tracked. For example, if we start seeing repeated HVAC condensation calls in the same unit type, then it immediately like falls back on the design team and the construction team to make sure it does not happen on our next project. We also bring asset management in before turnover and not after turnover. They review the drawings before pre-construction and design period. Their perspective is invaluable because they are the ones living in the building like every day on a day-to-day basis. I recently had a conversation with an on-site property manager at one of our senior living communities, and she pointed out like one simple but very important thing. For senior living, toilets need to be slightly higher and the bathtubs needs to be slightly lower. It's a
Hmm.
small detail, but that makes a big difference in day-to-day usability and safety, and especially considering it's a senior living building. Tenant feedbacks matter too, but we filter it through data. One complaint might be a preference. 20 complaints about the same thing usually point like something is wrong. It's a design fault or some construction was not done right. At the end of the day, every project becomes a prototype for the next one. If construction
Mhm.
doesn't learn from their opportunities, you're guaranteed to repeat the same mistakes, but again, just pay the higher cost.
Learning is so important from your mistakes and from your past.
You have to keep learning every single day of your life.
You've published written work on punch lists, post construction activities, and mixed use challenges. From that research and experience, what are the most expensive mistakes you see owners and contractors make at closeout and turnover?
The most expensive closeout mistake aren't cosmetic mistakes, they are baked into the system. The first is like rushing turnover. Everyone's under pressure to generate revenue. So, by skipping proper commissioning, incomplete operational and maintenance manuals, or unresolved life safety issues, they create a long term operational problem. The second is like poor documentation, missing as builts, unlabeled panels, incomplete warranty information. They force maintenance team to guess, and that guesswork turns small issues into expensive repairs. We also make sure to hand over a finished schedule and material list. So operations, asset management team, they have a clean cheat sheet for finishes and fixtures. Third is unclear warranty responsibilities. Without a clean handoff process, issues get delayed, trades disappear, and problems become owner paid fixes. In mixed use projects, coordination failures at shared system get expensive fast when no one owns the interface. Closeout isn't just paperwork, it's a setup for the next 20 years or 30 years. Done right, the project performs better. Again, if it's rushed, then the owners have to pay for the bills.
Just as
Yeah.
important. The last section here is on construction technology and tools. You rely heavily on Excel, ClickUp for collaboration, and Yardi for financials. Where does tech genuinely add value in your workflow? And where does it still feel like extra work on top of what you were already doing?
So technology should make your job easier, not just turn paperwork into digital paperwork. For me, Excel is still the backbone. It's fast, flexible, great for cost modeling and what if scenarios. Most project managers don't need more dashboards. They need clearer answers. Tools like ClickUp, they help me with coordination, keeping design, construction, development, asset management, all these departments aligned. So decisions don't get buried in emails. Yardi, it's an accounting software. It's critical on the ownership side because it creates discipline among budgets, monthly draws, forecasts, paying invoices, keeping a track of reports. So it's a long term asset management tool. We are also starting to use like tools. Recently, we got into an AI estimating tool called Construct IQ. It speeds up your takeoff and gives you early pricing so that teams can focus more on decision making instead of manual number crunching. Where tech starts to fail, it is when the same info gets entered multiple times. Tools get rolled out without changing how people actually work, or project managers turn into a data entry clerks instead of leaders. Technology work, it works best when it supports good judgment, not when it tries to replace it.
Mhm.
As AI shows up more in construction, the teams that adopt it early and use it to get better insight, not just more data, will be the ones that will progress.
No, technology should be like electricity, it should just be invisible.
Yeah.
Right. The last question here, Aditya, is because your company builds and then owns its projects long term, life cycle cost is critical. Can you share a decision made in pre construction that ended up saving major time or money years later in operations?
One of the most impactful choices we have made over and is investing extra in accesses, in drainage, and serviceability during pre-construction. Things tenant never notice, but operators they live with it every day. Take mechanical and plumbing access for example. Early on, we push for larger access panels, clear service zones around the equipment, logical shut-off locations, and consistent routing across unit stacks. Front, it looked like waste space and extra cost. Years later, it paid for itself many times over. Maintenance is faster, less invasive, and don't involve tearing up finished spaces around it. Another area is side drainage and grading. Spending a little more during pre-construction to get slopes, grades, inlets, overflow paths right if it is done right prevented repeated water intrusions and costly reworks, especially during like coastal storms, which we get a lot in this region. These decisions don't show up as a win in a pro forma, but they absolutely show up in a lower operating costs, fewer tenant complaints, and less emerging spending. As an owner builder, you quickly learn that the cheapest decision during construction is often the most expensive one during operations. Yeah, at the end of the day, like construction is not just about putting walls and roofs, it's about like thinking 20 years ahead. Every decision you make in design, pre-construction, execution shapes how a building performs, how the tenant experiences it, and how efficiently the building is operated.
Yeah, you're not just building for right now, you're building it for the future, long term future, in fact. Very cool. Aditya, this was great having you on the show. I enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for having me. Like to share my thoughts, my views. I hope it helps who are watching this. I look forward for the construction industry to grow big time.
Thanks for listening to Finance at the Job Site. If you found today's conversation valuable, share it with a teammate and subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. You can listen on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or watch on YouTube. Just search Finance at the Job Site. Until next time, here is to building smarter, faster, and more profitable projects.